Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. The Administration of Justice Indictable Proceedings Act 2011 and its 6 amending acts will be proclaimed on December 12th, 2023. That is tomorrow. The Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs said the proclamation of the act, which abolishes preliminary inquiries, will create sweeping changes to the function of the courts and the dispensation of justice. Now, we need to understand exactly what preliminary inquiries are, because this is a conversation that has stemmed years now, but it is happening. However, is it actually going to lead to such sweeping changes and the dispensation of justice as the Attorney General has suggested? Well, I'm joined this morning in studio by my guest, Attorney at Law, Ms. Fareed Ali. And good morning, sir. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Mr. Shaija. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining me. As we get into this conversation, I think there's a need for an understanding of exactly what preliminary inquiries are in the context of Trinidad and Tobago's criminal justice system.
What we need to understand is this. The Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, Section 4, speaks to citizens of this country having rights, enshrined rights. One of those rights would be a right to life, liberty, enjoyment of property. Another one of the rights would simply speak to a right to a fair trial. That falls under Section 5(2) of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. A right to a fair trial allows an individual who is charged for a criminal offense to be told what the offense is and for a prompt hearing. At a prompt hearing, and a prompt hearing simply means that that individual, as soon as the charge is laid, is brought before the court, whether it be a magistrate's court, and at that magistrate's court, the charge will be read to him. He will be called upon to plead, meaning to say whether he's guilty or not guilty. If he's not guilty, if he pleads not guilty, then they address the issue of bail. Once bail is granted, if he can access bail, he comes into the free world and he accesses his trial process or his pre-trial process from the free world. A preliminary inquiry is simply this. If one is charged for a criminal offense that is a serious criminal offense, what happens is one is not called upon to plead, and let's say that offense is that of murder. You have a pre-trial process, and a preliminary inquiry is a pre-trial process whereby the individual is served all of the witness statements that the police would have garnered and to prove a case against him. He is given a copy of the same, and he's allowed to read those statements, and his attorney will assist him in terms of interpreting the content of the statements. Having seen the witness statements amounts to evidence against him. So he gets a working understanding of the case that the police built against him in terms of the investigation that led to the charge. He would instruct his attorney in terms of, when I examine witness statement A, B, C, D, and E, I agree with this, I don't agree with this, this isn't true, this is an exaggeration, this is hyperbole. And then he would instruct his attorney as to what his defense is. His defense may very well be that this is fabrication, it's mistake, simply meaning that the police has the wrong man. They arrested the wrong individual, they're accusing me wrongfully, or it could be, in the case of, let's say, self-defense, that they arrested the correct individual, however, the police version of the facts is wrong. So at an inquiry, the purpose of a preliminary inquiry is to have a hearing before the trial process. And at that hearing, the magistrate would listen to the witness evidence as given by the witnesses in the matter. These will all be police witnesses, and the magistrate will be sitting there listening to the evidence given by the witness and be in a position to look at the individual and try to determine from the witness's demeanor whether this is a witness of truth and whether the witness evidence that is coming from the witness is sufficiently strong that magistrate can form a view that the magistrate, can commit this individual to stand trial before a jury. So in another way, a preliminary inquiry is simply a pre-trial process where witnesses are tested in an open courtroom, where they offer the evidence, having sworn on the Bible, having sworn on their holy book, having affirmed to tell the truth, and then in giving that evidence, the magistrate is able to hear and form an opinion on the quality of the evidence. If it is, the magistrate looks at the evidence and thinks that the ingredients of the offense were not satisfied, the magistrate could simply form the view that I do not think this evidence can stand up to the scrutiny, and I'm discharging the accused person of all charges and allowing him to go free. If the magistrate is of the view that the ingredients of the offense were satisfied, then what happens is the magistrate would commit him to stand trial, and he will read to the individual what we call a committal warrant. A committal warrant is a document which says, Mr. Shah, having heard the charges as laid, you were charged for attempted murder. I am of the view that having heard the police witnesses, having heard the civilian witnesses, having heard from the victim or the alleged victim, that you indeed were responsible in some way, or not culpable, but I am of the view that the evidence seems to be pointing in the direction that you were responsible in some way, and this is an issue that needs to be ventilated before a jury. A jury at the High Court will hear the evidence from the witness, so the process will be transferred to the High Court, what we call the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago, either the Supreme Court in Tobago, in San Fernando, in Port of Spain. And there a jury will be put together of civilians, and that jury now will hear the evidence with a different view, with a view to determining innocence or guilt. So the inquiry, the preliminary inquiry, was an important process. It has always existed in the life of the criminal justice system in Trinidad and Tobago, and it is one stage that allows for the ventilation and the perusal of witness evidence, and for the accused to not only hear the evidence, but to instruct his attorney as to how to cross-examine or what areas to cross-examine on in order to disprove the case that is made out against him. Very often what happens is, through the course of time, because of the levels of criminality and the exponential growth in criminality in the life of our jurisprudence and in the life of the criminal justice system in Trinidad and Tobago, the state had to tweak the different elements of the inquiry to make the process more efficient and more functional. Let me say that in another way. When evidence in its rawest form or in its purest form at the lowest level had to be presented in a courtroom, very often, let's say it's a sex offense, you bring the VC, which is the victim or the alleged victim, in court. She comes and she swears to tell the truth. She is then placed in the witness box, and the prosecutor in the courtroom, or the state counsel, the lawyer representing the DPP side of the case, they would lead evidence and say, so what happened on the 5th of March 2005? And walk us through step by step what took place. That took a toll on the victim, because sometimes when victims have to recall the trauma that they may have gone through, it's not an easy thing. It's an emotional time. It takes sometimes hours for that evidence to be led verbally, orally, in a courtroom. So in 2005, what happened is there was a tweaking of and the passage of a piece of legislation, another preliminary inquiry act, but it was Preliminary Inquiry Offences Act, Indictable Offences Act, which allowed for the evidence in chief, which is the evidence of the victim, meaning the prosecution's evidence, not to be orally presented in the courtroom, but to be placed before the court in the form of a written statement. So the victim would write out, or if she can't write it out, a police would write on her behalf her evidence, line by line, and it could work out to be pages and pages of evidence. At the end of that process, she would sign the document as saying, this is the truth, and then they would do what they call a declaration before a justice of the peace. Or the declaration indicates that I declare that the evidence as stated in this statement is truth, and I'm aware that if it is I tell an untruth, then I'm opening myself to prosecution or perjury. When she does the declaration, there's what you call an authentication that takes place where the justice of the peace would ask her, were you forced to give this statement, or were you, was fear inflicted in some way? When she says no, he authenticates the document by way of signature. So there's a certification of the document, which is the statement. There's a declaration, and there's an authentication. That is what you call a sworn statement when it goes through those three processes. That tweaking cut the process at the preliminary inquiry in half. No longer would you have to lead evidence with the victim and then bring the defense attorney to cross-examine that witness. That process is cut in half when you present the statement. So the statement is given in advance of, and the victim and the police witnesses who's coming to support the victim's evidence, they no longer have to talk in court in terms of the evidence being led with them. The
statement could be read in court? It
could be read, or basically it is served upon the other side, meaning the defense attorney and the accused, before the pre-trial process begins. So I can come to court for a case management conference, and they hand over to me, these are all the statements, the 15 statements, which speaks to all the evidence against you. You can go home and read that. You can sit with your attorney and read that. And when it is vetted by your attorney will come back to court now and say, okay, I've read all the evidence. I've taken instructions from my client in terms of he has informed me or spoken to me concerning that which I've read. I'm what we call instructed by him, and I'm ready to cross-examine witnesses. And what he said at that stage is, I no longer want to see 15 witnesses. I no longer want to cross-examine 15 witnesses, because the witnesses who's offering evidence that could affect me, it's only about 4. So what we're saying there is it was the inquiry tweaked through the years, was able to be able to condense. It was condensed through the years by various tweakings, and where we are now is a removal of the process altogether.
There are so many factors that you've highlighted. First of all, it's the burden on the witness, and you've also highlighted bail, whether a bail is determined at the pre-trial or not. You've taken a look at evidence as well. You've highlighted the issues in regards to the magistrate as well, and the delays within the court system. There's so many factors that you've highlighted here. So let's start unpuzzling this and see where the Attorney General is coming from when he says sweeping reviews. The bill is going to be proclaimed tomorrow, and preliminary inquiries are to be abolished. If that be the case, what happens next? Who now has the evidence to determine whether or not this is an offence that goes to trial?
What has been happening in the past few years is that there was introduced into the criminal justice system the portfolios of what we call masters of the court. Masters of the High Court, they are judges. They have a special function that involves the vetting of the cases that come before the Supreme Court and determining whether it's at the level where trials can begin. Let me say that in another way. With the creation of the post of master, you have a trained attorney and a trained attorney looking at all the witness statements that we spoke of from the inquiry. And when they look at those witness statements, they would be able to assess the evidence that is in the statement. So each statement is evidence. Mm-hmm. And if it is, we have scores of statements or tens of statements, then the master would look at these statements and make a determination, having read the statements and having looked at the exhibits that come with the statements. So let me explain what an exhibit is. If it is, we have somebody who gives a statement that they were raped, and to determine whether a rape took place, one has to be examined by a medical practitioner. The medical practitioner would examine the cervical cavity and make a determination as to whether the hymen was broken. If the hymen was not broken, then scientifically no rape took place. If the hymen is broken, then scientifically a rape took place. So the medical certificate that clarifies or gives details as to whether the state of the hymen, and which is basically evidence of sexual penetration. That in itself is what we call an exhibit. So the exhibit will be attached to the statement of the police officer that took the victim to the hospital to have her medically examined. And that police officer would come and say, listen, I took so-and-so to the Mount Hope Medical Sciences Complex. She was examined by Dr. So-and-so in my presence, and I was given this medical certificate at the end of the process, which reflects certain things. And that would have been attached to his statement, and he would give that evidence. So when I say that statements should be examined and exhibits should be examined, that is an example of an exhibit. If it's a firearm offense, the same police officer would come and said, I was in the presence of Mr. Shah, having searched him, I found a revolver. When I asked him if he was the holder of a firearm user's license, he had none. I subsequently preferred charges against him for unlawful possession of a weapon. And the L-shaped object found in his possession was examined by the Forensic Science Center, and it was proven to be that of a firearm. So the certificate that speaks to that is attached to the statement of the officer who would have searched you, and that would be an exhibit in the matter. So statements and exhibits are presented before the master. So in looking at and examining the question that you ask, what we have now is masters are being introduced into the system, and their function is to look at the statements that were previously looked at by the magistrates. So the preliminary inquiry that once existed, that will no longer stand. It has been removed, it has been abolished, and to take the burden off the magistracy and out of the magistrate's court, it has been transferred. The burden is now in the hands of a master of the High Court. And the process for determining whether there's a case answerable by an individual that may be placed before a jury is now in the hands of a master. What the Attorney General seemed to have done is nothing new. It's not novel. In Trinidad and Tobago, we tend to copy what is being done in other jurisdictions. This practice has been happening in Antigua prior to now. It has also happened in other Caribbean islands. A sufficiency hearing is basically a replacement or a substitute for the preliminary inquiry. It is designed and it's engineered, and the mechanics of it, it's all geared towards a faster, quicker process. When I said earlier that in the leading of evidence before the magistrate's court, they introduced what we call statements, and the evidence would be led through statements and then cross-examination of the witnesses, or the witnesses who would have presented the statements would be done. The AG was of the view that even that process became too lengthy, tardy, and it took too long to have inquiries completed. He went so far to say that some inquiries were lasting 3 years, that attorneys were over cross-examinating. He went so far to say that cross-examinations were dragging the inquiries longer than anticipated, and they were defeating the purpose of a quicker hearing. What he didn't say, and what he may have said and euphemized in saying, is simply this. We have 8,000 indictments being served on individuals in terms of criminal offenders each year that are burdening the magistrates' court. We have 11 magistrates' courts in this country, 50 magistrates, 3 Supreme Courts. When you think about it and you practically look at it, 8,000 indictments that are being served on the magistracy each year, it was impossible to ventilate and treat with those indictments and have hearings in each one of them in a calendar year. So there was overlap, meaning that we have 8,000 in 2022, we would have had 8,000 in 21, 8,000 in 2020. If the inquiries in 2020, 2021, and 2022 weren't complete, they would simply spill into the following year.
Yes.
And if we continue along those lines, then we would never complete all the hearings. So in their wisdom, whether it's meaningful or not, he chose to take the weight off the magistracy and place it in another place. My thing is, in doing so, one must ask oneself whether you're transferring the burden in another area and whether that area can carry the burden. If we have 50 magistrates that cannot balance the amount of the workload that is being placed on them. Where are we going to find a number of masters of the High Court who can carry the burden that the magistracy can't? One piece of information that was placed in the public space, apart from the 8,000 indictments that are being served each year, is that there are around 32,900 plus indictments that already exist in the system. Simply put, if you have 30,000 plus indictments that are not dealt with, and now you have 8,000 indictments that are being dealt with each year, you're simply playing a game of catch-up. There's no way you can possibly deal with the 8,000 that is being served each year. For instance, the 8,000 that would have been served in 2023. If that can't be completed, and we don't have enough masters of the court, or we had enough magistrates prior to masters to deal with that workload of 8,000 per year, how are we going to deal with the 39,000 that already exists? He has not given any details as to how they will deal with the backlog. And my thing is, how can the person sitting in the jails in Trinidad and Tobago really carry any hope that they're going to get any sort of resolution to their matters or any sort of justice moving forward?
Do we have an understanding of how many masters of the courts there are?
Well, it's a matter of public record, but what I understand is that more masters are being introduced. So to pin it down to a total, we're not in a position to say that. What we know is it's masters of the Supreme Court, meaning Tobago, San Fernando, and Port of Spain. Where are these masters going to sit? If we have judges that are sitting in the same structures, in the same courtrooms that pre-existed this introduction of the sufficiency hearing, and indictments now are being processed in a faster manner, when persons are committed to stand trial, if bail isn't granted or those individuals are unable to access bail, then those persons have to sit in the prison and wait. And apart from sitting in the prison and wait, the court itself, meaning the Supreme Courts, may not be in a position to have a hearing, a trial, or carry a trial. And those individuals now will just simply have to sit in the prison and await the indictment being served on them. An indictment being served on you is, yes, you've been committed to stand trial, but when we talk about service of an indictment, that individual now is served a document indicating, listen, you have to return to the High Court because we are going to begin your jury trial.
Mr. Ali, how does this legislation affect preliminary inquiries that are already in process? Those that have been going on, possibly let's say it started earlier this year or last year.
The inquiries that have started, that we are in the midst of, those inquiries, from the information we receive, will have to come to its natural end, meaning we are not going to stop that inquiry in order to engage it in a sufficiency process. But those that have not started will now be the subject of a sufficiency hearing. So any process that has already begun, any inquiry that has started in terms of witness evidence have been led and witnesses are being cross-examined, that will have to come to its natural end, meaning that the process will come to conclusion. We recently had that issue where the former Chief Magistrate, Marcia Caesar, having been elevated to the position of a judge, left 53 inquiries incomplete. What is going to happen now to avoid that sort of situation? The magistrates that are sitting in these particular matters will complete their matters. They will bring the preliminary inquiry that is in process to an end before the new indictments or the new inquiries that ought to have been begun before it is transferred to the Master of the High Court.
Oh, okay, I understand. Mr. Ali, we're going to have to pause here for the moment. There's a lot more we need to get into, but we're going to have to pause here for a moment. So I want to thank you for your time this morning, and we're going to have to continue this conversation hopefully later, if not today, later on tomorrow. Let's pause there for now, because there are a number of elements that we have to get into and examine as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, the conversations continue.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us this morning as we continue with the program. Now, this interview we've been trying to have last week. Unfortunately, we had to delay it. Nevertheless, we are in a position to have it this morning, and that is with the president of Tutor, Mr. Martin Lumpkin, over a number of issues that the association is dealing with at the moment. And it's not just the association's fight, it's also the fight coming from the NPT as well. We heard from them a lot surrounding what is happening in respect to the reopening of schools on September 2nd. We had an idea of the situation based on the conversation with the NPT yesterday. One of the other issues that we have not been able to touch on, which we'd like to do this morning, is in respect to the filling of vacancies. And from the information that we gathered, there is a severe shortage, a severe gap. So let me welcome Mr. Lumpkin to the program this morning. Hello, sir. Welcome back to AM Prime. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Shah, and good morning to viewers and listeners on the AM Prime program. Thank you for having us once again.
Well, thanks very much, sir. So, as I mentioned, there seems to be, the impression I get is a severe shortage of teaching staff across schools here in TNT. Now, I am aware of a situation between the Teaching Service Commission and the filling of vacancies, particularly with denominational schools. But is it something that's affecting only denominational schools, or is it across the board with the public school system as well?
It's across the board in all schools, from ECCE straight up to the secondary schools. And it's not only with the teaching staff, but the ancillary staff as well too. In secondary schools, you have the support staff, lab technicians, farm attendants, and even at primary school, sometimes it's even the cleaners and other, well, some primary government schools will have persons attending to the compound, right? Even in those areas, there are shortages.
All of which the Teaching Service Commission is responsible for filling.
Not all. In terms of the ancillary staff, it would be the Ministry of Education, and in the denominational schools, it would be the Board of Education. But for teaching staff, it is the Teaching Service Commission. For the public service staff, it will be the Public Service Commission.
So, Mr. Lumpkin, what's happening with the Teaching Service Commission in respect to filling the vacancies, at least with teaching staff? Let's start there, because I haven't heard anything from the Teaching Service Commission since this issue was raised earlier this year, by the way. but there hasn't been anything further. Is Tutor in a position to give us updates this morning?
In terms of the permanent positions and filling of permanent positions, we have not been given any further information from either the Ministry of Education or the Teaching Service Commission. We met with the Ministry of Education Permanent Secretary this week on Wednesday, and she said that the Honorable Minister will address the issue next week. We are in a position to say that the Ministry will be looking at a temporary arrangement in order to fill the gaps until the Teaching Service Commission can come up to scratch in filling the vacancies in a more permanent way. I want to say that Tutor is not pleased. We are quite uncomfortable with the process by which the vacancies are filled. There are persons who are waiting upgrades as well too. And we find that the information sharing, the communication between the Ministry of Education, the HR department, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, and the Teaching Service Commission leaves a lot to be desired. And I'm saying this very guarded, not really guarded, but I'm being diplomatic. We can use stronger terms in terms of that. But we are not pleased at all, because the Commission is saying that the Ministry is not sending in a timely manner the recommendations or the information, because in some instances they are asking for the performance appraisal, what we call the confidentials of the particular persons over a period of time, and they are not getting it. So when a vacancy is about to become or is about to arise, the Ministry of Education and the regulation says 6 months before is supposed to inform the Teaching Service Commission, and the Service Commission will do what in its part in order to have the advertisements put out. So it's the ministry to put out the vacancies and the process of an acting taking place. That's in the higher positions. In terms of the lower positions and like teacher primary, there are some denominational boards that will recommend an assistant teacher primary. Those persons would have the qualifications and be awaiting upgrade or assessment as T1s. Some have the minimum 5 O-levels, which includes a mathematics and a science subjects, while they are completing their degrees. Now, the minimum qualification is also a teacher's diploma, which is no longer afforded in Trinidad and Tobago. So the ministry has turned to the Bachelor's of Education degree. However, that back and forth between both the ministry, because ministry is telling us that they send the information in a timely manner. So it is a he say, she say situation, and we have called for a tripartite meeting whereby we can address these situations, because we are going back and forth. This one is saying they're doing what they're supposed to. The other is saying the next one not doing what they're supposed to. If 3 parties sit down and we are able to face it together, then we can get to the bottom of it. But it's not ideal at all. It is actually putting a strain on the system right now.
Well, why is it so integral, though, to have a permanent teaching staff as compared to temporary teaching staff? There seems to be if you have temporary teaching staff in place, and the definition of temporary is very vague in the sense whether it means full-time or not, or contract. What is the severe gap associated with having a short-term teacher, temporary teacher versus permanent?
But the short-term, as it says, is short-term. It's a stopgap measure. When you do not have a permanent position, there's no tenure of service. And in other words, you are up in the air. They can dismiss you at any point in time. So your position is at abeyance, in other words, and there's no security of tenure in the back of the mind of the employee. You can be dismissed without breaking the contract. Well, they will have regulations in place for it. However, there's no tenure of service. You cannot go to the bank and get a mortgage when you have that. And we have experience in Trinidad and Tobago that when there's contracts and you have to pay contract gratuity, it takes a number of years sometimes in order for the persons to get the contract maturity. There's also no pension. You will have to take that gratuity and invest it into some sort of, annuity or so. And some people may be tempted to spend out that gratuity. However, if you have, you have a pension running, then, you have that security as well too. It's basically security and tenure of service as opposed to being permanent.
Because I know that previously the Minister of Education, Dr. Ian Gatsby-Dolly, she indicated that steps were being taken to ensure gaps were filled ahead of the new term. You've also indicated that next week the Minister is seeking to address the issue and is suggesting that temporary measures will be put in place. That is just, next week will make it just over a week before school opens, depending on when she chooses to address the issue publicly. But at this point, is Tutor in a position to say whether or not schools would successfully reopen come September 2nd, given the severe infrastructural woes that we are aware of, as well as the shortage of teaching staff?
This is not a new issue, or these issues are not new. It's perennial. And schools have reopened sometimes under less than ideal conditions because of the dedication of our principals and our educators. And they have, in some instances, bent backwards in order to have the schools reopened. And there are instances where they can no longer do it and would say to the ministry it's not fit for reopening. However, our educators and education professionals have been doing their utmost best because they realize, and we are a caring bunch of professionals, especially seeing our clients are children. We do not want to have them not engage in some form of education and have them on the streets. Now, the online platform, whereas it may be convenient, there are some drawbacks in it. So there may be situations where the online platform can be utilized if schools cannot reopen. However, we are still in the process of negotiating with the ministry to come up with a policy that will suit the education system. But by and large, most schools will reopen come the beginning of the school academic year. And sometimes it's because, due to most times it's due to the staff, but they are also really, making big sacrifices to let this happen.
You said most schools would reopen. Is that an indication that you expect certain schools to remain closed come September 2nd?
Yes, based upon the feedback that we have gotten, I know one particular school, the principal has indicated to the Ministry of Education, to her line supervisor, that the school is not fit for reopening. And I can say boldly that it is Mount Hope Secondary School. I have visited that school. They have invited the OSH agency to visit sometime next week. Tutor will be present at that time when the OSH officer will be visiting to make his assessment. But the principal of Mount Hope has been sending correspondence over a number of years. And Mount Hope Secondary was one of those former junior secondary schools that was supposedly rebuilt. It reached maybe 80% completion. And then there was a stop to it for whatever reason. And we are quite upset because you had tens of millions of dollars being spent and you're almost to completion. And now if you see the state of neglect, if persons could have taken out the bricks from the wall, they would have taken it out. So now it's just a shell standing there. The galvanized, whatever interior work was done, have been taken out by bandits. And there's the allegation that squatters have taken it and built their houses with it. So if you see it now, if you are to go and start back and try to complete, it will cost you millions of dollars, more than what it would have cost you to complete it. And we are not even sure about the integrity of the structure right now. But there are a couple of other schools like that. And sometimes party politics play a part in this, and this is to the detriment of the education system, and by and large, the nation as a whole, when we allow politicians to stop projects, good projects sometimes. Sometimes they are not good projects, but sometimes they are very good projects. And because a new political entity comes into government, they shut it down because it was started by the previous political entity, and that has cost the nation, in our estimation, billions of dollars, and nobody is held accountable. No one.
I'm curious to know, please excuse me, I am aware that the Ministry of Education used to temporarily relocate students and teachers in order to facilitate upgrades or infrastructural works to various school outlets. Is that something that still exists, where students and teachers are temporarily relocated? I think the most recent was St. George's College that was relocated to the UTT campus in South Walsall. But even then, there were issues surrounding that.
Yes, and I'm glad you pointed out that, Mr. Shah, because actually the most recent would have been the Palmis Government Primary School, which was gutted by fire at the beginning of the last term. And the students were relocated to two compounds, the Londonville Government Primary School and the Edinburgh 500 Community Center. And till now, nothing has been done on that compound. And one, we want to point out, buildings that are not built for occupation, for education, always poses a challenge and a situation. So when you have community centers that were not built for education, and you have to relocate this part of the school or the entire school, so there are a number of schools we can point out, Rosilak, Hindu, Pinal RC, St. Dominic's RC, Pinal, and there are others. Granville RC is actually an activity center, but they fortunately would have put up some container classrooms to help out there. But when that happens, there are a lot of challenges. And Pinal RC has been there roughly 6 to 8 years. And you can understand what happens at the community center. So the Palmis Government Primary School, nothing has been done there, and it is supposed to be a temporary. So we have been saying that sometimes temporary becomes permanent unless the PTA rises up, until we continue to make representation. And the excuses are always the same, which is financial constraint. We understand the financial constraint, but governments and successive governments have proven that they can find funds for projects that they deem to be critical, or it is high up on their agenda. What about education? Is education not high up on the agenda of our governments of Trinidad and Tobago, such that you cannot find the funding for it? We have the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, which governments have drawn down on for lesser projects. And we are saying boldly that education is so important for Trinidad and Tobago that I believe that the nation will not have generally a difficulty drawing down on it to improve the infrastructure of our schools, because the Honorable Minister of Education did say we have aging schools, but they have not come up with the solution. So you know the problem. We are suggesting a solution. We are not always about, pointing out the ills of the education system. We will also provide solutions, and to us, that's one viable solution at this time.
The power of principals, just to get a clearer understanding, principals have the power to keep a school closed for as long as they deem it necessary. Is it their discretion that will allow for a school to remain closed?
Under the Education Act, Chapter 27, and in the first duty of the principal is the safety of those on the compound. And we are of the belief that the principal should have the autonomy and the authority to recommend to the Ministry of Education that this compound not reopen. Now, they have limited, and so under the Act, it's limited, and they will make the recommendations to the Ministry of Education, who has the final determination. However, we are still of the belief that the principals, under certain circumstances, emergency circumstances, so there is a threat by way of, say, there's bushfire that's coming towards the compound and there's smoke and so on. They have the authority to utilize discretion because they cannot tell how quickly the fire service may respond. And so they should be allowed to, actually not should, they must be allowed to close the school in order to preserve life and limbs.
Mr. Lumpkin, with the time that we have left, though, would you suggest that the education system, based off of the infrastructural woes and the teaching staff shortage, and as you pointed out this morning, ancillary staff as well, in many instances, even cleaning staff, do you think that the education system is collapsing, not on the verge of collapse, but rather is collapsing?
Over the years, we have been of that opinion that we have a failing education system, not only based upon infrastructure and staffing, but the curriculum as well too. Is the curriculum designed for national development? Our scholarships really designed for national development? Has the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago looked at carefully what is required in our nation in order to build it or continue to have it built from third world status to first world status? Are we really looking for that? So the nature and purpose of education, are these standardized tests really what is for our children at this time? What about the technical vocational areas? So we're having schools over 50 years, 60 years. Granville will be 100 years next year, I believe, and these schools have not been rebuilt or major infrastructural works done. And a number of schools do not have recreation grounds within the compound. Isn't recreation and physical education and sport important to our education system as well too? So there has to be a step back and look at things properly. But we are saying, yes, it is failing our society. And if we are not careful, when we get up in the morning, we can say that the education system has collapsed.
Well, Mr. Lumpkin, as I said, you've been a very busy man, and I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning on the program. I know in the weeks leading up to the reopening of schools, this is part of the process, but
yeah.
I am aware, we can't say that this is anything new, as you mentioned. This is something that Tutor and by extension the NPTA has been raising concerns for quite a long time. So I do hope that next week, when the Minister addresses the issue, that Tutor and all parties involved gain some sort of satisfaction. I hope it brings only good news, put it that way, Mr. Lumpkin, because it's very unfortunate what we have to learn about every day in respect to our education system. But thank you very much for joining us, sir.
You're welcome. And let me say, it brings no joy to us to have to report these issues to the nation and to our members. We would like to have an education system that is running smoothly. It makes our job much easier. It may not make us redundant, but it will make it much easier. It brings no joy to us. We would like to see that our members are taken care of properly by way of salaries and by way of working conditions. But the situation is such that we have to be clamoring in the public space on almost a daily basis, representing our members. Thank you once again for having me.
Thank you very much, sir. All the very best to you. Take care.
Same to you. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we await to hear from the Minister of Education, Dr. Neil Gatsby-Dolly, next week. And we will have a fairer understanding or idea as per the Ministry's plans for the reopening of schools come September 2nd. It's being forged ahead with don't expect anything otherwise than that. But our understanding suggests that not all schools will reopen, not just because of infrastructural, but also because of a shortage of teaching staff, ancillary staff, and in some cases, a cleaning staff as well. So we just have to keep our ears and eyes open and hope for the best. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime. We will return shortly.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Here is your WESN News on the hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Police probe death of 2-month-old infant in San Fernando. Venezuelan teen found dead in New Grand drain. Manhunt underway for armed suspect who escaped police custody. And internationally, arrest made over Matthew Perry's death. Now for the details. Police are investigating the death of a 2-month-old infant identified as Javion James. Early Wednesday morning, James was rushed to the San Fernando hospital by his parents after they found him unresponsive at home. Despite efforts, he was declared dead upon arrival. Reports indicate there was no visible signs of violence, but the child appeared underweight. A post-mortem has been ordered to determine the cause of death. PC Abdul is leading the investigation. Police are investigating the death of 17-year-old Santiago Claviel, a Venezuelan national living in New Grand. Claviel's body was discovered face down in a drain along Hindustan Road near Grace Anglican Church around 3:35 p.m. on Wednesday. While there were no visible signs of violence, his face was partially submerged in the water, raising suspicions of drowning. A post-mortem has been ordered to confirm the cause of death. Investigations are ongoing, led by PC Maynard. Police are on the hunt for a 20-year-old man who escaped custody while being transported between stations on Wednesday evening. The incident occurred around 5 p.m. on the Western Main Road in Point Cumana when the suspect, handcuffed and in the back of a police vehicle, managed to open the door and flee on foot. He was initially arrested at a party in Chaguaramas on August 11th in connection with multiple shooting investigations. Authorities warn the public that the suspect is considered armed and dangerous. Anyone with information is urged to contact 999-555 Crime Stoppers or 800-TIPS. In international news, arrests have been made over the death of Friends star Matthew Perry, who was found unresponsive at his Los Angeles home in October. A post-mortem examination found the cause of his death was the acute effects of ketamine, a controlled drug which the recovering addict was taking as part of supervised therapy. LA police opened an investigation in May to determine why Perry, 54, had so much of the drug in his system when he died. On Thursday, 2 law enforcement sources told the BBC's U.S. partner, CBS, that arrests had been made in the investigation. The news was first reported by TMZ. Police and law enforcement officials have not publicly confirmed the reports. Well, that's your news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for watching.
Gentlemen, thanks for being with us this morning. Well, Tobago is desperate, but the TJ is not giving up. That's according to Chief Secretary Farley Augustine. Now, Keith Scotland, Minister in the Ministry of National Security with responsibility particularly for the TTPS, visited Tobago and had a walk through Tobago with the Police Commissioner earlier, Christopher. He's in the process, according to some reports, of actually collating a report, and hopefully we'll have an idea of his plans for Tobago very soon. But the situation is dire, as is in Trinidad and Tobago, which to me is still paradise, is really facing a decay due to the criminal elements. Now, a gentleman to speak about this morning, he's decided to bless us with his presence. He's not always the easiest man to get on the show, so I'm grateful that he's here. Good morning, Angie Aline. Welcome back. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Good morning, Keaton. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Well, Ajay, I know that the situation, as according to the Chief Secretary, Tobago is desperate, but you also felt a lot of frustration, which you've been speaking of within recent times, due to the public's response as well to the situation in Tobago. Could you just kindly inform us a bit more as to exactly where your frustrations stem from?
Yeah, what I think has been happening over a number of years, I think it's due to ignorance. Simply because we do not know. I listened to the chief's statement quite clearly. I have family based in Roxborough, not too far from where the last major incident happened. And it's almost generic, it's almost like AI-generated response. So once Tobago or Tobagonians choose to defend themselves, choose to defend them and choose to speak, and speak firmly to an issue, we always hear this secession talk, Tobago wants to break away, they want their own thing. And I'm thinking, you have criminal elements beginning to infiltrate the island, place we love, and because we choose to now say if you are a criminal element or if you're involved in illegal activities and if you may have man killers hunting you down, quote unquote, do not come to Tobago. Why we see that as being Tobagonians having or wanting secession? I mean, this goes right back to reading Hansard for the two Tobago Acts, the 1980 and the 1996. And sadly, there are parliamentarians who still sit in parliament, today, who still was pushing the same secession agenda. I mean, I came on this very same program, and I showed you guys the document when Tobago became a ward of Trinidad. And that's why we have Gillingham Street named in Scarborough. So I am wondering, is it deliberate that these politicians aren't educating the population on our relationship? And what's so wrong? I mean, we saw the Gulf Stream quietly sailing into Tobago waters, overturning and doing so much damage to our coastal system. Captain does come, we want compensation for it, they don't want to compensate our fishermen for the damage this caused. No problem, fine, all well and good. We do not, or I can't remember the response time it took for the Coast Guard to get a vessel to Tobago. Came with some booms, some cleanup supplies, we appreciate that. But we have had numerous fishermen disappearing off the coastline. And colleagues having to put up money to go to look for their own persons. There was a Coast Guard vessel stationed in Charlottesville. No vessel. I mean, if the Coast Guard cannot move from an operational base in Charlottesville to Scarborough because they don't have a vehicle, can they respond to problems on the water? I mean, I had to support the chief on the statement. If he had to buy two boats like Mr. Solo and the Vortex, so be it. Because the island is becoming an open sepulchre.
Well, you said that you support the Chief Secretary with his comments over that, but his acquisition of the two fishing vessels to support the Coast Guard was frowned upon by the former Commissioner of Police, Guy Griffith, But more so, it was an overruling on the part of the Minister of National Security, who put a stop to it. And that is what forced the Chief Secretary to come out and make the comments about Tobago being desperate, so they need a desperate solution. But the Chief Secretary's actions, do you support his actions in acquiring those 2 fishing vessels?
My initial response to this would be quite simple. In politics, there is something called strategy. There's tactics, there's play on words, and the chief is a linguistic. So initially, I did not like the idea of TJ purchasing 2 vessels, simply because that's a 6th schedule matter, and I know I would have showed the 6th schedule to your viewers previously as well. So it's a 6th schedule matter, which means it's the responsibility of the central government. However, the Prime Minister visits Tobago more than the Minister of National Security. I mean, last week, Tuesday, I went to purchase breakfast at a famous venue in Tobago, and I was able to meet the Minister of Works and Transport casually enjoying his breakfast. I have never seen the same being done for the Minister of National Security. And I mean, he has somebody who has Tobago roots. He may not want to admit it, but he has Tobago roots, particularly in the countryside of Tobago. So I found it very interesting. And it also seeks to a larger question. What really, or who really manages the assets of national security? Because, I mean, we had the Augusta Westland 139 helicopters, and all of a sudden we had an issue with the management. And I can tell you, Keita and Shah, the technology on those aircrafts at the time were world class. I mean, they could intercept phone calls and distance from far. Kidnappings were dropped to an all-time low. Just because of the capability of these helicopters, you have them grounded taking dust and doing what? If we have these Coast Guard vessels prepared to do it, are we signing proper maintenance contracts? Are we now saying, hey, what's going to happen? We're going to send 25 Coast Guardmen, 25 young Coast Guardsmen to go and do engineering? Are we going to send them across to Hostal so they can be Hostal certified engineers to work on these vessels? Do we have them actively involved in the process of building of these vessels so they will have a very good idea as to the schematics? I mean, let's think. Chagaramas is one of the largest marine overhaul centers in the region. We only second to Panama. And complaining about jobs and employment?
Well, the argument is Chaguaramas is supposed to be really the premier hub regionally for the shipping industry. We're supposed to have a major shipping complex out in Chaguaramas, so because of the waters that exist there. But I don't know why we never sought to go after that opportunity. We saw all these boats visiting Trinidad during hurricane perils, a passage through the Caribbean. But putting a pause on that, and though that's a very good point, you mentioned that the Minister of National Security, you don't hear from him or see him when it comes to Tobago's crime situation. So does the appointment of Keith Scotland as the Deputy Minister of National Security and his subsequent visit to Tobago bring about some sort of promise or some sort of hope?
No. Simple. I mean, I live and work in the Crown Point area. And for me, from the time I saw the walkabout, I saw it as a photo op, I saw it as a political gimmick. I have a number of colleagues of mine who are members of law enforcement, and they can tell you why they didn't visit the Scarborough police station. Because there are serious issues. The dormitory at Scarborough police station is in a mess. The bathroom facilities up there are deplorable. It's almost worse than the prison. It's the same challenge you have with the Scarborough fire station. The Scarborough fire station was built off of goodwill, and that construction was led by the former head of the fire service in Tobago, Mr. Thomas. Why we haven't seen that fire station turned over and open? I mean, I know he's responsible for police and policing affairs. I would agree. But you could talk to your partner a little bit. I mean, if you go to the Shervan police station there, I saw a photo with members of the bicycle club and that happened, which is all well and good. But why they didn't go to the opposite side of the station? Where it's almost a scrapyard. I mean, you could make more money off of scrap iron of these police vehicles that have been damaged and all parked up at the Shervan police station. And then when we call to report an incident, we have no vehicle. I mean, Roxborough is almost one way in, one way out. An incident took place in Roxborough initially. All you had to simply do was lock down the entrance and the exit. The white shirts weren't around to be issuing tickets and searching vehicles at that point in time. Chances are the perpetrators would have been trapped. Okay, cool. It passed, we love it. Bless God for that. a second incident happening in Roxborough again, and we still haven't seen within a decent response time the roads blocked off. I mean, are we serious? Is it strategic? Is it political that we're allowing things to become out of control in Tobago? I mean, at this point, I don't know what to think as a Tobago now. I mean, we have great things happening this weekend.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I want to know, in your opinion, then, what is it going to take to resolve this situation? The Chief Secretary is saying we're desperate for a solution. But even you yourself have found that Keith Scotland's walkabout was a photo op. But what is it really going to take to deal with the situation on the island?
For me, I think it's going to be a cultural shift. We need to go back to what Tobagonian was. I mean, I knew of the days when my grandmother would bake bread. And if she bake 25 pan of bread, 5 remain home in the household. I remember the days I could not have given trouble in school. Because before I got home, my mother knew all the details, you know, everything that happened. And the likelihood was a second cocktail was booked for me. So we need to go right back to the soul of what it means to be Tobagonian. Tobagonian are generally commercial people. Let's be commercial with a purpose. There's no one who jump in through the back door, but we can't see when an outsider jump through. I mean, I have heard so many stories concerning the same scenario in Roxborough, where we have a lot of strangers coming in. People picking up on the strangers, people, but I don't know this individual. Oh, this looking fishy, so. But we just don't have that level of trust with law enforcement to go and give them the information. So what I find would happen is, I know a friend in the police, I would give that friend the information over going into the station and making a formal report to build a level of comfort. But when you now have persons who are saying is the familiarity breeding the problem, what you're going to have happening, sadly, you're going to have a lot of foreign officers on the island, and Tobago is going to become very tight-lipped. Because any external force that comes strong on the island, they're usually meeting with solid resistance. So even if you have an influx of Trinidad officers, once the approach isn't pleasant, once the approach isn't conversational and they don't build a relationship with the Tobago populations, it will be throwing waters and ducks back. It's just going to get worse and we're just going to get more quiet.
So Tobago is losing its soul, based on the argument that you're making. But you said there will be some level of resistance, and Tobago really needs to go back to what it was. There's been this notion that it's not Tobagonians to blame for the situation on the island itself. It's Trinidadians or bad elements from Trinidad coming across to the island and really causing mayhem. Do you agree with that? If you're also making the argument that Tobago is losing its soul and needs to go back to where it was, do you agree that it's only bad elements from Trinidad coming across?
No, I think it's a mix. I think it is a mixture because let's be real, badness sells. There is money in crime. There is legal money in crime and there's illegal money in crime, whether you like it or not. It works both ways. I wouldn't say it's only the rogue elements of Trinidad, because as we would have seen, it's an organized network, because it's not only affecting Tobago. We've seen it in St. Martin. There's elements of it throughout the region. We saw what happened with Plumpy Boss most recently, and we pray and hope that he's able to recover and he's able to turn and share the experience and so on to the other younger persons who his fans will be able to realize it's not the best life to live. It's risky. But I think it's both elements. It's both the good and the bad intermixing. Tobagonians are generally welcoming. We still are very welcoming. And I think the criminal elements are beginning to play on our welcomeness and our being so open.
But why? What I find difficult to understand, if all Tobagonians more or less know each other, Tobago is a very small island, and I've seen it. Tobagonians, it's like one big family across on the island in Tobago. Well, if that is the case, why are fellow Tobagonians still hesitant to speak to Tobagonian police officers? If everybody knows each other and has that sort of familiarity, why would Tobagonians still be hesitant to speak to Tobagonian officers?
I think what we need to understand with the way these criminal organizations operate, if I talk, chances are I would be killed. That's the reality. We're so close in contact where if I say something and just on the suspicion of me saying something, I become a target for these criminal elements. And that's happening throughout Trinidad and Tobago. That's not limited to Tobago. If they don't go for me, they will go for my child, my parents, my family. So it's a scary tactic, it's a scary reality that we're facing throughout Trinidad and Tobago now, sadly.
So back to the point earlier when I asked you what is it that needs to be done. You're speaking about Tobago needs to go back to what Tobago used to be. In terms of national security, what on the island immediately, we're not talking about short-term solutions leading into long-term solutions. What would you like to see being done on the island?
Okay. Well, firstly, I should have said this at the beginning. I don't vote on crime. Crime is a decision an individual would take or a group of individuals would take. And I don't think a politician could really mind of a criminal. That's just my view. I could be wrong. Feel free to challenge me when necessary. But I think, one, we need to ramp up border protection across Trinidad and Tobago. So we need to have more air assets for surveillance. We need to have naval assets out and running. We need to upgrade our radar system to monitor the flow of both vessels and aircrafts in and out of Trinidad and Tobago, first at the beginning. So we know we have them trapped in a space where traversing in and out is not as free as they would like. And gradually you could close it in the circle of the different elements, because you would have an idea as to where the criminal elements would lie. You would have an idea as to how they would operate. Because I remember in one of the scenarios, one of the senior officers in Tobago stated they spoke to a particular individual and they told him to leave Scarborough because intelligence indicated to them that they wanted to kill him. Some rogue elements wanted to have him eliminated. And they spoke to the individual responded by saying, whenever my time reach, and I'll fight it. And the public got this information after the individual was shot and killed. And my question was, if you have this information, why didn't you, one, apprehend the individuals? Or two, from the time the individual had died, you know, based on the intelligence that you had, that these were the individuals that were involved. Why not immediately have them in for questioning? Why not have them charged for conspiracy to murder? And then you build the conversation from there, because clearly they had the information. And I am now wondering, if we have the information, what are we doing with it?
So then what about the operations of the police service on the island? Because Caller Cecil has spoken publicly saying that we hear the situation in Tobago. We ourselves are not giving up. Hold on. He's also spoken of the TTPS's works and the improvements that they have made, particularly with Larceny, for example. But he himself has lamented open borders and saying that's not the TTPS's responsibility. Generally speaking, though, the operation of the Tobago Division on the island, have you actually seen some improvement, as is what Caller Cecil has put forward publicly?
Yes, there have been improvements, I would be honest. We have seen a heavier police presence a lot. There have been a lot more vehicles in and around the space. But I'm also of the view police need to move away from using marked vehicles to having some more unmarked vehicles. I think this culture of having police in uniform, I think we need to change that as well, heavily. Because once officers are easily identified, criminal elements would not show up, they would not appear. I think we need to move away from having so much uniformed officers and use a lot more plainclothes officers. I think that would have a greater impact on the island. I saw something a couple of weeks ago as well, though, and I must commend Officer Kerr and his team for that. There's a particular area in Scarborough that has a tendency to be a hot area. And I sat on the port and I saw them pull up, soldiers and police officers, and they just jumped out of the vehicle and began to walk briskly, swiftly, and we saw a number of guys just take off. And I think we need to do that more often, and the only thing is we need to have these officers attired in plain clothes. During police and army operations, the soldiers, once they have their military ID on them, I believe they will be able to carry the same power, so they don't need to always be in the unit. That's just my suggestion.
But actually, I hear you with respect to the walkabouts, but I mean that's to an extent counterproductive if individuals who we can deem suspicious, once they see these officers, I already speak about plainclothes, but once the officers were doing their walkabout, if these gentlemen just suddenly disappeared, isn't that counterproductive?
And this is what I'm saying. I saw it as being a photo op, because you're walking around with a number of military personnel. They were spread out in a perimeter, You have the minister and the commissioner on the inside of the security perimeter walking through the.
No, then I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were referring to just a random police operation. I didn't realize.
Yeah, no, I saw a random police operation in Scarborough. What I'm saying is, for me, as soon as these officers jumped out of the vehicle and they began to walk, guys just took off. As simple as that. Because they were visually in the uniform. So even if it means we have some officers who move without uniform prior and have the uniform officers trailing, that might also be an option. But I think we need more undercover policing, man. I don't think we need it. Yes, yeah, officer, we don't always need to see in the uniform. You have Independence Day for that. No, and I'm saying specifically in a Tobago space. I mean, we need to see more officers on bicycles, probably you take a team of officers to do different activities in different areas. So the police service could decide, hey, internally, we're going on a hike. We know the hike is to go into particular areas to see what's there, but that don't have to be known public. It could be a normal internal activity where the officers decide we're going to take a hike. And the officers might bounce upon different things. Yes, they're not going to go unarmed. I mean, you're not going to go without your personal protective equipment, which I seems to be a firearm in their case. Because you don't know where you'll beat up on. But you could do casual activities and encounter what's taking place on the ground. I mean, the police in Tobago, it does not have to just be big guys with big guns driving around in these big X-rays and running up on people's place. No. You could use a simple, softer, more common approach and figure out what's taking place on the island. Once you build trust with Tobagonians, they will talk, but you have to be able to spend time and build a relationship with Tobagonians.
Well, speaking of building trust, the final question to you, Aj, is you spoke about unfamiliar crime-fighting elements. And if you have interventions taking place from foreign entities, there may be a resistance. One nation, two islands. If you see more and more police officers and law enforcement officers from Trinidad coming to Tobago to assist with the situation, would Tobagonians resist in such police operations?
Based on the approach. But once it's the big stick bossy and control type of format, failure. If they come and they integrate into the communities, if they come, they play sports with the younger persons, you might see them join the All Floors Club and say integrate into the society, it will work. However, but once they don't make that attempt to integrate and they come to big stick and to boss around, chances are they're going to just say, okay, cool. They'll just leave that alone.
But the argument is they're not there to make friends. They're there to do a job, which is to clean up the island of the criminal elements.
Yeah, it comes back exactly to my point. It's not what you need sometimes, but how you do it. Because I mean, I've spoken to officers in Trinidad and in Tobago, and they will tell you it's two totally different policing style. They can't use a Trinidad policing style in Tobago. That's just the reality. And then you begin to overdo that type of roughness and aggression. Tobagonians generally aren't aggressive people. I mean, we do protest, we do burn tires, we do hear Tobagonians in much. I mean, long ago, I might hear 1-2 fist fight, but we generally aren't an aggressive people. You really have to cross Tobagonians for Tobagonians to really become aggressive. If you come with that same aggressive approach, chances are it's not going to work. And then it's easy to identify a Tobagonian from a rogue element in this space, because you would see it. Once you integrate into this space, you'll have an idea that this individual looks fishy or these operations look suspicious. It's very easy.
Well, Ajay, I'll tell you what. Let's wait to hear more from Keith Scotland on his report following his walkabouts in Tobago, and see whether or not it really proved to be a photo op or not. Might surprise all of us. Might be actually something that is beneficial. You never know.
And I mean, the most we could do now is hope for the best and do the little that we possibly can. I mean, the small influence or the small following I may have, the most I can attempt to do is probably have a conversation with some of these guys. The most I could do is probably tell them leave it alone. But I think we need to change the approach. We need to look for guys who look more like them. I mean, I don't like to see politicians going to these areas and speak to these guys in shirts and tie. I mean, but they put on your short pants, as the chief was saying, put on your short pants and your jersey and your Crocs, and sit down and talk to them. I mean, that might be the easiest option. They might get a little second-hand smoke, or a little second-hand weed might hit your nose, but I mean, that might probably work. Mr. Scott might have to sit down on the block with some of these guys without the cameras.
Well, Ajay, let's see what happens, my friend. But thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. Thank you for your presence and for sharing your thoughts and opinions and painting a picture for us as to what is happening in Tobago and what Tobago needs.
Thank you.
All the very best, my friend. Don't stay too frustrated. You're still living in paradise. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's Ajay Alim, former Commonwealth Youth Parliamentarian, Regional and Commonwealth Youth Parliamentarian, joining me on the program this morning. He is very much frustrated as per the situation, really a patriot, and has put forward some sense of solutions, not necessarily on the island of Tobago. But he's hinting that Tobago is losing its soul and it really needs to get back to where it was. And law enforcement needs to integrate itself a bit more in order to have some level of success or greater success than what it is already experiencing. But we await to see or hear more from Keith Scotland and his reporting to the public following his visit to the island. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen, for AM Prime. Thank you very much for my guests for joining me this morning on the show, and thank you, the viewer, for joining me. As always, wishing you a good day ahead, a safe one and a productive one, and may this weekend be good for us all, one way or the other. I'm Keaton Shaw, reminding you today is a good day, to have a good day and a great weekend ahead, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
young at heart, purpose-driven, patriot even. When you like to party, but are still passionate about discussing important issues, the only place where your needs will be met is WESN Content Capital.
Goal we don't know yet, and maybe that is part of the design. The secrecy in which this operation was conducted was in secret not only to the Russians but to most Ukrainians. I would imagine that only a very tight circle of individuals know of the eventual goal of this daring operation.
Peter, you said it could potentially be used as a bargaining chip. So essentially, what Kyiv would essentially take control of a chunk of Russian territory the size of what Russia has annexed of Ukraine and potentially Crimea and say, okay, now let's swap.